School Musical, and all of you are my parents. Where I'm like, I just know all the faces.
They're the cool parents, though.
All right, final panel of the day, but you guys are in for a treat. We got Kevin, Mathilda, and Rena from Gitcoin here to talk about the evolution of grants from QF to multi-mechanism future. Big round of applause for the panel.
Thanks, Adam Wozni from the Akash Network. Thank you. Doing great work.
Welcome, everybody. I am Rena O'Brien, Executive Director at Gitcoin, co-founder of Allo.capital. Here today to talk about the evolution of grants, as so kindly mentioned, with Mathilda and Owocki. Gitcoin Grants has been a leader in funding in Web3 funding for years. And we're going to talk a little bit about the evolution of what that funding looked like, where we're going. But first, Mathilda, you want to give a little bit of an intro?
Yeah, sure thing. So my name is Mathilda. I am grants program lead at Gitcoin. I have been at Gitcoin for almost 3 years, and I've been involved since Jira 15, so quite a few rounds.
Awesome. Owocki, I'm going to have you introduce yourself next, like you need to introduce yourself. But once you've done that, could you actually walk the crowd through QF, why you and Gitcoin created it, and why it needs to evolve?
Yeah, sure, happy to. So hey, I'm Kevin Owocki, one of the founders of Gitcoin, and Rena and I have also just started working on a venture together called Allo.capital, which is all about on-chain capital allocation, and maybe we'll talk about how that fits into the multi-mechanism future later. But you asked about quadratic funding and what makes it so magical, and how we've been working on it. We actually did not invent quadratic funding. It was invented by Zoe Hitzig and Glenn Weil and Vitalik Buterin. And basically what they wanted to do was find a more democratic way to fund public goods, things like open source software, the things that Ethereum relies on. And the really magical thing about quadratic funding is that you have a matching pool, and when people fund grants in a grants round, they'll be matched by that matching pool on the basis of the number of contributors to the grant, not the amount that's given. So basically that creates this dynamic where you can give $1 and the project gets $100 if it's democratically supported enough. And so it's this really amazing mechanism that decentralizes power from these grant administrators who are kind of like power brokers for their ecosystem into the edges of the network. The people that just have $1 and want to give to their favorite causes are now the ones who are deciding what projects to be funded. And so quadratic funding, you could call it democratic funding. It's a very democratic way to fund what matters in Web3. And Gitcoin Grants has been quadratic funding from January 2019, GG1, to GG22, which was at the end of last year. So about 6 years of quadratic funding under our belt, and it's been a real journey. We are so thankful to Glenn and Vitalik and Zoe for inventing quadratic funding.
Awesome, thank you. Curious to you both, do you think it's going to continue getting us where we need to go in terms of grants and capital allocation?
I think that there's a plurality of different ways to fund what matters, and doing it in a more democratic way is one way to do it. I think Optimism and Vitalik Buterin have been inventing retro funding, which leverages the fact that it's easier to fund what matters with the benefit of hindsight than trying to speculate on what will do good in the future. So retroactive funding is another mechanism out there that's doing a really great job of funding what matters. I think Protocol Guild has done a really great job of creating a very simple mechanism for funding Ethereum core infrastructure. And I'm also really excited about deep funding, which is Vitalik's new idea about how to fund dependencies in Web3. So I look at this as we need multiple tools in our toolbox to solve this problem, and we shouldn't be a maximalist about any tool. When I'm trying to fix something in my house, I'm not like, oh, I'm only going to use a screwdriver because I'm a screwdriver maximalist. I take a right tool for the job, and the tools all complement each other. And I kind of think of what we're doing now with Gitcoin being multi-mechanism as now we have a toolbox, we have a multi-tool. If Gitcoin 1.0 was a screwdriver, it was quadratic funding. Gitcoin 2.0 is a multi-tool. It's got a bunch of different tools that fund what matters in ways that are different and complementary from each other. So it's really a very exciting design space, and I think that when we talk about Allo Capital later in the panel, we can talk about how we're really pushing the boundaries of what's possible there, and Gitcoin will be the place that we showcase the coolest stuff that we invent.
Yeah, to kind of touch on that as well, that's exactly what rooted our decision within Gitcoin Grant to evolve the program into multi-mechanism. We realized after 22 rounds, like Owocki mentioned, quadratic funding is a really powerful mechanism, but it's not a one-size-fits-all. And what we started noticing within our quadratic funding rounds is that we got the same builders that came into each round, and they became really established and they became really successful, but there was this competition that started happening with the early stage projects that were up and coming in the rounds that were struggling to compete for matching caps and for the matching funds against these really established projects. So what we did at the end of last year, we had a look at the program, we had a look at our past 22 rounds, and we realized we need to evolve this. We need to take it away from just quadratic funding, but how exactly are we going to do that, and what is that decision making going to look like? So we went really to the builder level. So we're also moving into a much more builder-centric mindset. So what we decided to do was, and this is what we're going to experiment with in GG23, which is going to kick off early April. So it's, yeah. So it's coming up really fast, but basically what we're doing, Gitcoin Grants, what it looks like now, if you're not familiar with what it looks like these days, we return to our roots of funding open source software. So we have our OSS program, which to date has been quadratic funding rounds. And we also have this decentralized part of our program that we have given to the community. So this allows any community to come in, fund their own ecosystem that we also partly fund. So what we're doing with our multi-mechanism future is within our own OSS program, we're separating our builders out between early stage and mature. And the early stage builders will be pushed through quadratic funding rounds, and then our mature builders will go into a curated retro round. So this just allows for a fairer funding distribution, and it just makes a lot more sense with the goals of our program.
Can you talk a little bit, and this goes for, I suppose, some of the round operators in the audience, like what were some of the challenges, and where do you think this is really going to impact the builders that you're trying to fund?
Do you mean challenges just within the program, and why?
Going multi-mechanism, baby. I was there for the record, so I know it wasn't necessarily the easiest thing. Or even a better way to frame it, what are some of the considerations that people who might be looking at going into doing multi-mechanism should consider?
Yeah, that's a good question, because it's kind of a twofold question, because multi-mechanism has been a solution to a lot of problems, or it's been a solution to what we've been seeing, but it does also come with a lot of complexity. How do you communicate it out to your community where they should funnel into? I think it's really important to create very clear funnels for your builders as well as your donors. So you need to understand where your builders are showing up, where they're coming from, and how you're communicating to them. I mean, communication in any grant program is one of the most important things, as we know. And I mean, even to this date, we've learned so much about how that communication breakdown has happened, even just with quadratic funding rounds. So I think that's one thing, but then, I mean, it's going to be a massive experiment. So one of the things that I have been really proud of being involved in Gitcoin Grants has been how we take community feedback, how we iterate and evolve, and we're really stepping into this new age of let's go out and try. Let's not be scared to risk it, and if it's not going to be perfect, that's okay, but let's get feedback, let's hear from the builders, and let's take the community along with us. So to kind of wrap up and answer that question, it's communication, it's making sure that all the funnels are really clear and that the community also knows what we're trying to achieve with our program and if they are a good fit to participate from a donor or a builder perspective.
Nice, thank you. Owocki, I know that you've got a few posters in terms of the evolution of many different things hanging in your office in the Regen Hub. But can you talk a little bit about what you've seen in terms of the evolution of funding outside of just even QF, and what some of these experiments that we're doing, or anyone could be doing in both capital allocation, could mean for the ecosystem?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you got to check out the Regen Hub, which was our co-working space in Boulder that we run as a DAO. So go to regenhub.xyz if you want to hang out there next time you're in Boulder. And we do have a bunch of posters on the wall that are cool infographic maps of different things in Web3. And I think you asked about the resource allocation over time poster, which is this really vibey poster that you can get at store.gitcoin.co that shows the history of resource allocation over time. And it's, if you've never thought about it, it's kind of surprising, but resource allocation has evolved through human history, from the hunter-gatherer age when we were small tribes to the agricultural age, which we started to form around small towns, and then the industrial age in which we did it at scale, and then the information age. You now have giant technology companies that are serving millions of people. And over time, we've seen the changes in how resource allocation happens, from things like rotational labor systems or commitment pooling in the hunter-gatherer age to more co-op type models in the agricultural age. And now the information age, we have, you know, nation states and companies that we use to resource allocate. And so once you see the history of how resource allocation has evolved over time and how it's been evolving as human governance changes over time, it kind of opens up your eyes to the possibility of what is possible in resource allocation and governance in the internet age. How do you pay your rent and do it in a values-aligned way? We can design better systems because we now have the internet and we have on-chain mechanisms. And so the thing I really think is very powerful about this is that we're moving from the industrial age into the information age, and we're building this parallel society where we can fund public goods and we can fund what matters in a novel way that's never been possible before. Blockchains give us transparent, corruption-resistant, programmable money, and it's global in nature. And so I think that we can invent new mechanisms to fund what matters in the 21st century. And by the way, one of the things you learn from the resource allocation mechanism poster is that for most of humanity, the groups that were resource allocating all knew each other. They had FaceTime with each other. There wasn't a lot of hierarchy like you have in these Fortune 500 companies with 10,000 people working at them, and they have served 1 million constituents. And so you have these hierarchies that started to arise and would start to channel all the resources towards the executive suite and towards the, you know, like the more in a plutocratic way. And I think that there's an opportunity for us to go back to decentralized organizing in small groups, leveraging the coordination mechanisms that are on chain. And in a way, I think that, like, if our industrial era institutions are declining in legitimacy, maybe we look to what existed before them. You know, instead of insurance companies like United Healthcare systematically denying claims because they just are full of bureaucracy at best, or at worst, they have a financial incentive to deny claims. What if we look to the way small towns would fund each other's health needs in the pre-World War II era and build insurance DAOs? What if we find democratic ways to do commitment pooling and bring that kind of mechanism on chain? So I think we're relearning how to rely on each other instead of having to rely on the nanny state. And there's something really beautiful there. And it's always moving over time as we've evolved. Humans have evolved new ways to coordinate resources, and we're just at this place where we're about to crack into what's truly possible with blockchains. And I think that Allo Capital, we want to be that tip of the spear that's really pushing what's possible forward in this new design space. And that's why I've been pushing out so many books and research reports and shit posts, because we got to discover the new frontier together. And it's just such an exciting design space. So Allo.capital is our new venture where we're doing research on this stuff, issuing reports, and then writing software. And then the cool thing about being Gitcoin alumni is that we can go pitch that software back to the Gitcoin Grants program, take it for a ride, and you're going to see some wild stuff in Gitcoin Grants in 23 through 27, because we're just surrounded by people pushing boundaries of what's possible. And it's a convergence of talent and capital and intellectual capital and financial capital. And I think we're going to demo some cool stuff over the next cycle.
Thanks, Owocki. Bringing it back to grants, actually, Mathilda, I'm going to throw you a curveball. Yeah, I'm not going to hold you to anything, but I mean, you've done some amazing work for GG23. Super stoked for the multi-mechanism funding, but I'm curious in terms of the opportunities that you see ahead of us, both as an experimental version in the grants program and what we can do for builders in the community, getting more builders into the program itself. Like, is there anything that you're like, next up is going to be like road wars? I don't fucking know. I like whatever. That's the new funding mechanism. Write that down. Owocki. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a big question, and it's one that I've been thinking of a lot. I think one of the things that I've thought of a lot, with the evolution of Gitcoin grants specifically, is when GG started, we were kind of the only funding program in town. And now we've got an entire ecosystem with so many funding programs in the space, which is incredible. But it does add also complexity for builders on how to navigate that. So one of the things that I've always thought of with Gitcoin grants is how do we support builders beyond just funding? And it's not something that has been super baked into the program, at least, not since I've been involved with the program. And part of this looks like, how can we engage our builders, not only like, show up every quarter or 3 times a year now and, come get some funding and cheers, see you next time. How do we create more sustainable spaces and resources for those builders to keep engaged with us, where we can grow our own community, but also allow them opportunity to go and, succeed within the space as a whole? Because the goal of the program is, to fund OSS within the Ethereum ecosystem. So we have this kind of responsibility to not just keep it within, the Gitcoin ecosystem, but also allow them to innovate and flourish elsewhere. So I've been thinking a lot about this, and we are planning on, we're looking this year at launching a mentorship program. We have onboarding programs coming up, but that's just the beginning. And it's not tricky, but it's you need to be able to understand as well those funnels and where to engage your builders as well, and also how they're showing up for your program and why. So there's like a lot of pieces to that. But I also think that what I'm really excited about this future with what we're doing with GG23, going multi-mechanism, it's not something that is simple, it's not something that is easy, but I really think that it's worth it. It was really time to evolve, to take that step and to make some really big changes. And how I see it evolving is exactly what Owocki mentioned earlier as well, like bringing in other experiments into the program as well, wherever it makes sense. And we're doing this with the community rounds as well. We're really encouraging our community rounds to also experiment with mechanisms. I actually was speaking to a round operator the other day, and he asked me, okay, well, which funding mechanism would you recommend? And I was like, the one that makes sense for the goals and KPIs of what you're trying to achieve with your program. We're not sitting in a position anymore where we are dictating, you need to run QF rounds because that's what we do. It's like, if you want to go and allocate capital in your ecosystem the way that makes sense, that's what we're going to encourage. But kind of what I see as well is getting a lot more granular with the categories within OSS that we also fund, and how we can allow the community to also maybe make those decisions moving forward with other
Decentralized,
mechanisms.
baby.
What she said was decentralized, baby.
There, I'm back. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that, Mathilda. Absolutely. I would encourage this group as well to check out gov.gitcoin.co and see what some of the things that we're baking both for the program and for Gitcoin, as well as research.allo.capital. We've got a ton of interesting mechanisms that I'm really excited to work with on the program with Mathilda. And we welcome voices. Like, we're here to experiment on the program, and if that means keeping builders, supporting builders, and that's part of the grants program. Like, that's any evolution of a grants program, and that's the tricky part, right? Like, how people will go grant hopping. and continuing to evolve. And we want to hear from the community and what would get more builders into our grants program, so that we can exemplar it for other people's programs. And with that being said, like Owocki, like how are we looking at building the next like generation of funding infrastructure? Where do you see the opportunities there?
Well, the incredibly humbling thing is that it's going to be invented in the Ethereum ecosystem and not just at Gitcoin. So I'm excited about going from doing Gitcoin grants, the community rounds on GrantStack, to starting to use things like grant ships and Easy Retro PGF, and there's a plurality of many amazing tools that too many to name out there that I think that we can weave into our infrastructure. And there's a real 3-3 here with mechanism designers and capital allocation infrastructure builders. And I think that with Allo Capital, we can publish research that helps builders figure out what's going on and what to build. We can build technology that allows them to start on third base as they're building it. It's just an American baseball way of saying that we're going to accelerate the builders. Sportsing, yeah. And then, so we could be the first capital into capital allocation builders. We can be their initial seed check. So first money into new mechanisms, first technology into new mechanisms, first research into new mechanisms. And so it's about accelerating that network of builders that are building cool stuff. And we can give them, in addition to capital, technology, and we can give them distribution through the Gitcoin grants program. And so I'm seeing Gitcoin becoming a shelling point for the wider Ethereum ecosystem and mechanism builders to deploy their mechanisms. And we have a $16 million matching pool that we can deploy about $1 million per quarter towards the most interesting ideas. It was $16 million last time I checked. I think it might be around 14 now because it's denominated in ETH. But I believe in networks, and I believe in their ability to produce intelligence at the edges. And so these network of builders are going to deliver us a lot of really cool stuff. And Allo Capital and Gitcoin can accelerate those builders by giving them what they need. So lots of really cool stuff on the frontier, and can't wait to see how it goes in GG23 and then evolve towards doing more cool stuff in GG24. Gitcoin's very protopian, which means that it gets better every single quarter is better than the last. And we have this iterative approach to the program, and we optimize for a local maxima, a global maxima of what's possible over time. And so I want to set expectations that GG23 will not be perfect, and I think that we're going to iterate towards perfection over time. And the team that's working on it is amazing, Mathilda included. So can we get some snaps for Mathilda in the GG program? Okay. All right, I had to get you snaps because I said that it wouldn't be perfect this time, but the truth
I
is,
was like, oh,
we
way less pressure.
we can only iterate towards perfection.
Yeah, I think that's, like I've mentioned it before, and that iterative approach is really powerful, because, and it's okay. That's what I love about the work that we do and the step that we're taking. It's like we're being vocal about, come along with us. It's not going to be perfect, but this is why we're doing it, and this is why it's important. And we've gotten a lot of really positive feedback with the changes that we're making. Now it's just our responsibility to make sure that those funnels are super clear, that our communication is super clear, and of course that the round goes as smooth as possible. But there's always something that comes along, but that's part of it, and that's the beauty of what we're doing. If it was perfect, I would say maybe we're not doing something right. I don't know.
We run a quarterly grants program and a quarterly shit show, in case anyone was wondering. You can just check our Twitter feed for what's been going on there. Thank you both for that. I think that's great. There's a lot to be learned in terms of the evolution of grants and how you support both your community, the people that you're trying to get the funding to, the donors and whatnot. And I love that we're taking the initiative to try and see what that could look like with the multi-mechanism. We've got a few minutes left, but I'm going to ask Owocki's favorite closing podcast question. Is there a question that you wanted me to ask that I didn't ask?
I actually have two closing podcast questions, and the first is, in a world where you're maximally successful in 10 years, what does the world look like? And then after that, I ask, is there anything I didn't ask you want to say?
So you're just being ornery now. Pick a question. Pick one of them. Just one of them and answer the question.
I think in 10 years, if we're massively successful, we are going to fund what matters democratically and emergently and at scale. So that's what we're iterating towards. And if you do the math, 4 rounds a year times 10 years is anyone good at math? That's 40 years.
Anybody?
40,
Seriously? Web3 nerds,
40
come on.
quarters. So in 10 years, if we could just have 40 iterations towards 40 iterations towards funding what matters at scale democratically. And so that's what the world will look like.
3 rounds a year now, so not 4.
Oh no!
But
you let me do all that math. Now you have to redo it. Okay, so 30 iterations. Can we do it in 30 iterations? Some of our developers are sitting in the front seat nodding yes, so we can do it.
yeah, we can.
Swagman says yes. All right. Mathilda, same question. It sounds like you've got 2 options to pick from. If we are successful in 10 years, what does that look like? Or is there a question that you wanted me to ask that I didn't ask you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Owocki. That's kind of what I see as well. One of the things that came into my head as well was around, there's a lot of talk around impact, impact creation in the space, and a lot of grant programs are evolving to be a lot more specific with tracking impact and tracking the impact of your program. And I think that's also something that that we are busy starting to improve within Gitcoin grants. And that's part of that long-term goal, because that is the impact that we want to get to eventually. But what does that look like at scale? What does that look like, right now? And sometimes we need to do a few iterations of the rounds to actually understand the impact that we are creating. So the beautiful thing about Gitcoin grants is that we have so much data. We are sitting on a mountain of data from 22 rounds that we've ran, and now we're going into this multi-mechanism future, which I'm super excited about. So really just making sure that we are learning from each and every round. We're looking at the impact that we want to create. Is that in line with the goals of the program and what the wider ecosystem within Ethereum needs, and then kind of just iterating from that. So it's kind of just something that came into my head. So I don't even know if I answered your questions, but or either one. But
I mean, just from working with you and knowing from the grants evolution and what we do see for that 10-year future, being able to have impact measurement as well as experimentation, I do think that we should continue evolving. And for those that don't know, we are mostly we're a 2-sided marketplace at Gitcoin. We've got our grant stack technology that is serving our partners that are running their rounds, but then we also have our community. And so there's a delicate balance between what we do with that technology in order to serve 2 very different types of customers. And I will say Mathilda has spearheaded this beautifully and worked within the organization to get some of these features out. And we are always looking for ways to experiment because it's the front door to our technology. And that technology is what brings in the revenue, which keeps us funding public goods and funding what matters. So with that being said, I think we've gone through the mechanisms. Owocki, you can see you're prepped for something.
Can I have my second final question?
You have a 2-minute warning. Please begin wrap up. But yes, you can do your second question.
Owocki, is there anything Rena didn't ask that you want to say? Yes, there is. Thanks for asking. I just wrote a book. It's called How to DAO. It's all about my adventures in building DAOs and Gitcoin becoming a DAO. And I kind of think of every quadratic funding round as an ephemeral DAO. DAOs don't need to exist forever. A quadratic funding round takes a couple months of prep, a couple weeks to execute, and then a couple weeks to do a retrospective and do the payouts. And that's kind of like an ephemeral, democratized, distributed, autonomous organization. And so I'm really excited about this design space of DAOs and democratic resource allocation and going more peer-to-peer in the on-chain world. And How to DAO is your guide to that revolution. You can go to howtodao.xyz, howtodao.xyz. You can pick up a copy of the book and learn about our evolution and also get equipped for mastering the future of internet coordination. I believe that there's going to be a lot of abundance and opportunity online for the next generation of hackers and builders. And, for time immemorial, people have gone to the frontier looking for riches and abundance and resources. And our generation's frontier is the internet. And I think DAOs are going to be sort of the vehicles that we go forward in the internet. And so by teaching more people how to DAO in a way that equips them for that journey, I think more people will get onboarded into crypto, and they'll get onboarded and equipped to be successful. This isn't like influencers onboarding you through a YouTube channel and selling you their coins. This is actually giving you the skills that you need to participate in the revolution. So TLDR, buy my book, howtodao.xyz, and 2 more seconds. Thanks, Rena, for being our moderator. Thanks,
Thank you.
Mathilda.
Oh, and if anyone wants to find out about Gitcoin grants and GG23 and dive more into what we're doing there, go to grants.gitcoin.co. Okay, last show.
Thank you for bringing
Thank
it
you
back
so
around
much.
to grants to land the plane, Mathilda.
Oh, is that what we're talking about? Grant?
Thank you, everyone. Have a
Thank you.
fantastic weekend.